Stalin built the gulag, his vast network of labor camps, on Lenin's foundations. The Solovki archipelago northwest of Archangel was the site of the first camp. It was set up many years before Hitler's concentration camps. Hundreds of thousands were held in this former monastery and its surrounding camps, many of them deported kulaks from the Ukraine. They labored on Stalin's roads and railways and his pet project, the White Sea Canal. For those who entered here, there was no hope. Prisoners began their lives without provisions or tools, often even without shelter. Many would have died from cold in the first month.
Originally, the prisoners had the possibility of working hard so as to cut their sentences. But then Stalin suggested that prisoners who worked well should not be released from the camps. In effect, the terms gradually began to increase. If at the beginning a prisoner was given 3 years, the terms were then increased from 5 to 10 and up to 25 years.
The images of Stalin's gulag are less familiar than those of Hitler, yet with their watchtowers, barracks and barbed wire, they mirror the Nazi concentration camps. Both systems took a terrible toll of the camp populations, but the gulag Stalin began at Solovki was to last for more than half a century and end only with the fall of communism.
The history of the Gulag is the history of the country, and Solovki became the cancerous cell from which the whole tumor of the Gulag stemmed. The Solovki guards were later put in charge of many camps throughout the whole country.
Stalin's war on his people took a devastating toll and corrupted his own personality. He spent much time in the Kremlin, working or watching films, one of his few means of contact with the outside world. He became more and more isolated from the people he ruled. In the early years, his marriage had been relatively normal, but as time passed, his wife Nadezhda, always independent-minded, became upset by his brutal methods. "You're a torturer, that's what you are. You torture your wife," she said. "You torture the whole people until they can take no more." In November 1932, after Stalin drunkenly insulted her in public, she returned home and took out the gun she carried for her personal protection.
She shot herself in the heart. She didn't spoil her face, and so she lay in her coffin as if she were alive. She looked very beautiful. When Stalin saw her, he said, "She left like an enemy."
Stalin forbade any mention of his wife's suicide and destroyed her final note. He did not attend her funeral nor visit her grave.
The marriage of Stalin to Nadezhda Alliluyeva was a real tragedy, and when that marriage ended with her suicide, really Stalin became a very cold, frigid man who, in revenge for any kind of slight towards him, was even harsher than he had been before.
Hitler's relationship with women could be equally destructive. He was both possessive and dismissive. His first love was his niece, Geli Raubel. It's unlikely that Hitler ever had sexual relations with her, but when he learnt of an affair she had with his driver, he exploded in rage. Geli was forbidden from seeing other men and pursuing her career. In September 1931, she shot herself in the heart with Hitler's handgun. He was devastated. It was an extraordinary parallel with the death of Stalin's wife.
What it showed, I think, were men who found it extremely difficult to commit themselves to others, and people were desperate to get something back from these figures. But they were, in a sense, married to history, married to their mission. They were married to the outside world. I think they had much less to give to people in personal relationships, and they suffered for it.
Eva Braun, who worked as an assistant to Hitler's photographer, became the Führer's female companion for the rest of his life. She was responsible for the home movies taken at Hitler's mountain retreat, the Berghof in Berchtesgaden. She did everything she could to gain his attention, even once attempting suicide herself.
She was 17 years old when she met him first time, and he was 23 years older, and he adored her, and she was happy to have a man who adored a little girl. It was no normal relationship.
Hitler, like Stalin, kept his private life a secret. He hid Eva Braun from the German people. He told Albert Speer, within her hearing, that a highly intelligent man should take a primitive and stupid woman. He described his own female ideal as a cute, cuddly, naive little thing, tender, sweet, and stupid. Hitler had no family, yet he had a rapport with young children. And he could be charming just as Stalin could when it served his purpose. But with adults, he was always aloof. Quite unlike Stalin, he was a teetotal vegetarian and a militant non-smoker who disapproved of raucous behavior. It was often said that he preferred the company of animals, a reflection, perhaps, of his disregard for human life.
I remember we went to look at the wonderful new buildings and what was planned, and Hitler adored this situation. And he was with Speer, was present, of course, and they made plans and so on. We saw a man was coming, and he said, "I have a wish." And I said, "Well, tell me, what is your wish?" And then he said, "Free beer for me and my friends." And Hitler, then he was annoyed, and he said to his ADC, "Well, organize that this man gets his free beer." And after dinner in Berchtesgaden, they started a discussion of whether animals have feelings and intelligence. And he had a wonderful dog, an Alsatian dog, he liked very much. And then he said, "When I come home and my dog sees me, he is so glad. I know that he has a feeling. But this man today, he asked me beer. You see, this man has instinct, a human being, but my dog is better than the human beings like this man." And he was very much upset.
Hitler hated the petty routine of ruling. Unlike Stalin, he refused to read long state papers. At the Berghof, he would rise late and often do nothing all day. It was as if the mind-numbing routine of his private life was used to build up reserves for his manic obsessions, the pursuit of war and conquest, and his triumphal public appearances. Adolf Hitler was energized by the adulation of the people. It was his lifeblood. It was when on the podium addressing a rally fully immersed in the cult of the Führer that he seemed to find and reinforce his true identity.
Unser Reichspräsident Generalfeldmarschall von Hindenburg, Heil! Heil!
And he seemed to satisfy a deep-seated emotional need in the Germans. He was a vessel into which they poured their own national longings. For his part, the cult of the Führer, symbolized in the theatrical displays of power at Nuremberg, gave him identity and utterly convinced him of the supremacy of his will.
Hitler was a showman. Hitler liked it when his arm was stretched out. During the rallies, he would simply stretch it out like a brilliant dancer. He liked to appear on the screen in the evening in front of the people. He liked these huge parades and auditoriums. But Stalin would sit in his Kuntsevo dacha, and he would work and work and work.